Coming up on Kentucky Outlook, why is it that certain words in the English language conjure up an almost visceral response when they're read or spoken? Well, we're going to have a prelude to a future segment on Kentucky Outlook, something called word aversion. And we're going to talk organ donation today, two words that for a growing number of people translate into the gift of life. And later in the program, we're going to round out the half hour with that conversation that a lot of us don't want to have, end-of-life issues. Kentucky Outlook is next. The program is Kentucky Outlook. I'm Barbara Dee. You know, University of Chicago linguistics professor Jason Riggle likens word aversions to something he calls phobias. In an online article for Slate.com, Professor Riggle ponders the word aversion phenomenon, stating that the words evoke nausea and disgust rather than, say, annoyance or moral outrage. And the disgust response is triggered because the word evokes a highly specific image, something unusual, often associated with imagery, something that people would find disgusting. Well, next month on Kentucky Outlook, we're going to talk linguistics and word aversion. In the meantime, let us hear from you. Go to our Facebook page and comment on some of the words that you just simply cannot tolerate, or some words that you think we should throw out of the English language. That's on our comments on our Facebook page. That's coming up next month on Kentucky Outlook. But today we're going to discuss the very present reality of organ donation. And while we set aside the month of April to draw attention to organ donation, for those who need a transplant, it's part of the everyday vernacular. We're going to talk about that today as we welcome to the program Stacy Hughes. Stacy is the recipient of a liver in 2011. She's going to share that story with us. Thanks for being here. We're glad you're here, for sure.
I am too.
In addition, Amber McGuire joins us. She's with KODA, which is Kentucky Organ Donor Affiliates. Thank you for being here. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of thank yous going around. But there's a reason. When we talk about organ donation, it's an often uncomfortable discussion to have because somebody has to say, yes, I want to donate my organs. And on the other end of that spectrum, there are usually some very needy people, needy in the sense that they need those organs and or tissues to live. So let's break it down. Let's take it from the beginning stage. How many organs can you donate from just one human being?
A person can donate 7 or 8 organs, including the pancreas, and those organs can be transplanted into recipients who are very, very sick and who are in need of that life-saving transplant.
So when we hear organ donation, automatically you think about a liver, a kidney, a heart, but we don't think about tissues, corneas, skin.
Absolutely. There are a number of tissues that can be used. The vein in the legs, that's often used for bypass surgery. The heart valves are used for pediatric recipients that have heart deficiencies, as well as skin tissue for burn victims, bone, and the grafts. There's up to 50 grafts that can be made with the different types of tissues that can be donated to save and enhance those lives of those patients that are in need.
And we're going to hear Stacy's going to share her story, and it's really an amazing story in just a moment. But if you're watching this show and you think, you know, I've always thought about being an organ donor, there's a very simple way that Kentucky has made it possible to do just that. Is it really just as simple as signing your license?
Well, it used to be that simple. It's a little bit different now because you don't have to sign the back of your driver's license anymore. In Kentucky, we finally have received electronic database. And so what that is when you go to renew your driver's license or state ID, you go to the clerk's office, the circuit court clerk's office, and they ask you if you would like to join the registry. That puts you on the list of those individuals that want to save lives through organ donation. And right now in Kentucky, we're very proud to say that the clerks in the offices have recruited more than 1.3 Kentuckians on this electronic organ donor registry. So we're very happy that more and more people are joining when they go to renew their driver's license.
As we speak, you gave me the statistics before we started talking. There are nearly 1,000 people right now in the state of Kentucky, in this Commonwealth, who are in need of some type of organ transplant, okay?
Yes.
Today, 18 people will die.
That's correct. 18 people will die, and simply because we don't have enough organs to be transplanted. And so if everyone did join their state's organ donor registry, we would not have a waiting list, and we could end in that pain and suffering for so many patients that are in need.
And we're going to tell you a little more about that, because you might be thinking, well, I'm not a candidate for that, or I couldn't do that. And you know, we respect that, of course. But when you hear this beautifully poignant story, now Stacy looks very healthy, 2 teenage kids, and you're fine. You hiked Yosemite in October of 2011, and then suddenly you come back home and you're just not feeling well.
Exactly. Felt like I was a very healthy, middle-aged woman, liked to do things outside, mother of 2, husband, full-time job, and began to get very sick within 6 weeks after a fall break. And within a few days, I was so ill that I couldn't get out of bed, and was put in the hospital. And it was learned that my liver was failing. They could not find a source for it, so obviously they couldn't treat that, like if it had been hepatitis or mono or something like that. I was then transferred to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where they told me I was going to have a liver transplant. And I was just shocked, because I wasn't someone who'd ever been sick. But they told my family that I was not going to live if I did not have that transplant. I had about 2 weeks to live. They said that's the longest someone had lived that was in the situation that I was in. And so then I was put high on the list to get a liver, and it was like a whirlwind, because I'd never been sick. I was a very healthy person, and they told me that was what was going to happen. And I had wonderful doctors and wonderful nurses, and they helped me through that. They helped my family through that. But when you think you're healthy and then you find out that you're not, and that you're going to die, you realize how important organ donation is. And obviously I made it through the surgery and all the recovery, and that's not easy, to go through that either, but I'm very lucky. I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world, because there was someone out there who did tell someone that they wanted their organs donated if something happened to them, and that person saved my life.
And I want to hear more about the recovery and that kind of thing. So, okay, so first of all, the shock. I mean, you're perfectly healthy. You start to jaundice a little bit. Your eyes got a little bit yellow.
Yes.
Your urine turned darker. But those were no pain, no other symptoms?
No, I had some early symptoms in the weeks before. My urine began to turn a darker color. Then in the last, the weekend that I got so sick, I became jaundiced. My eyes turned yellow. My skin turned yellow. By the time I had the surgery, my skin was orange. I looked like a pumpkin. So yeah, but I didn't have typical things that you would think of as an illness. I wasn't vomiting. I didn't, not major things. And it really happened very quickly. I mean, within about 3 or 4 days that I realized I was very, very ill. And I'd always taken good care of myself. So yeah, I mean, it can happen to anybody. I mean, it could happen to anybody out there, just like that.
And then you're put, when you are in such dire straits and so ill, then you are immediately, help us understand this, Amber, if you're in need of a transplant, you kind of go up on the list, because in other words, if you don't get this, you're not going to survive.
Absolutely. We have had several patients this past December who are in need of liver transplants, and they had just days to be able to survive without it, and unfortunately we didn't have any available organs to transplant them. So their life did end because, again, we didn't have any organs
They didn't get the organs that they needed. We want to talk a little bit more about organ donation, as April is the month where we recognize that, but when you hear these stories, you'll learn that it's something that people recognize every day of their lives, especially if they're in need. We're going to talk more about that and end-of-life issues at the end of the half hour when Outlook continues right after this. Stay with us. Kentucky Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Dee. We're talking about organ donation today, and that's for some a very uncomfortable conversation to have. But when you're in a position where they tell you you have 2 weeks to live, or you're going to die if you don't get a liver, as is the case with our guests today. Stacy Hughes joins us along with Amber McGuire representing KODA. So Stacy, before the break, you shared with us the story, seemingly healthy. All of a sudden, your urine turns darker, you start to jaundice, your eyes get yellow, and they determine that your liver is failing. Never to this day can determine why that was.
Yes, they never found a solution
A
or
source.
a reason, a source, yeah.
So you got to the top of the transplant list through Vanderbilt in Nashville. You had the transplant.
Yes.
You had a liver in 2011. You got a new liver.
Yes, I did. At the end of 2011, I got to come
Wow.
home on Christmas Eve.
Of 2011.
Yeah.
And look at you, you seem so healthy. So help our audience understand, when you undergo something like that, there's a big toll, of course, that it takes on your body, not just physically, but emotionally as well.
Yes, it did. And I think anyone who goes through a major illness or a major surgery, obviously you have that. But with organ donation or organ transplant, there is an emotional change with you because you are getting something from someone. And in my case, the person had passed away. And so that's difficult. But then the recovery piece also, you've got to have a strong family friend network to kind of help you through that. And you know, whether you're going to be able to make it to go back to work and things like that. And I did. And but you also have to change your lifestyle. There are things about my life now that are different from when they were before. So that's a change. But all of those things together, you are so thankful. I am so thankful to be here. I feel so lucky because it was there are people who don't make it. And I was a very lucky person that there was somebody out there who did donate, tell someone I was going to donate an organ. So I feel incredibly blessed that I got that.
And the way it works, and I guess it's different with each hospital, but from what I understand, what you told me before the break, if you wanted to meet the individual's family whose liver you received, you'd have to write a letter to the hospital. And
in my case, I would have written a letter to the transplant department at Vanderbilt, and then they would make sure that the letter got sent on to that family, and then it would really be their choice as well. You know, because some people, they may not want to do that. Sure. That may be too painful. But I do think about that family, and I know that what their grief must be. So I do think about them and say prayers for them and my donor angel, which is what I call the person.
Absolutely.
Because they are an angel for me. But yeah, that's how it works.
And you personally have not gotten to that place yet. And like you were saying, it's really a decision that needs to be made by that person alone. Yeah.
We have some recipients that are sometimes filled with guilt because they received this gift of life and knowing that someone lost their life. And so they're benefiting from that. But we also have an aftercare program, 15 months, where we work with those donor families and make sure that they know that we are a support system for them, and have an opportunity for recipients to, again, correspond and even have the opportunity to meet each other in person.
Oh, I can't even imagine what that would be like. Now, you yourself, Amber, you've been working with KODA, Kentucky Organ Donor Affiliates, for 10 years, and you actually at one point got to be, I don't know what the proper terminology is, but when tissues were being transported, you got to do that delivery?
Yes, it was an amazing experience. I actually was a tissue recovery coordinator, and so when individuals would want to and be eligible and suitable for tissue donation, we would retrieve or procure the tissue for transplantation. And to be able to know that we are doing something that is going to make a huge impact, a positive one, on the lives of those individuals who are in need of cornea transplant to restore their sight. So different tissues to be able to help different individuals.
Pretty
so
exciting
pretty
stuff.
Amazing.
Now, you were talking also that the tissues that can be transplanted include the cornea and many other tissues, but often it's to help restore someone's sight. And I guess when we think about that, maybe we think of an elderly individual who needs to see, but you were saying a lot of the times it's children.
Yes, the patients that have come across to us have been children, and these patients have seen their entire lives, and then it's been some sort of injury or infection that would cause the need to have a cornea transplant. One little girl had a rock fly out underneath the lawnmower and hit her in her eye and destroyed her cornea. So because of that injury, she needed a cornea transplant and thankfully was able to get one.
So who's eligible to donate organs and tissues?
Anyone.
Anybody?
Anyone, any age. And it's best that people don't necessarily rule themselves out and let the medical professionals, you know,
Make
at
that
that time to make
determination.
that determination.
So you're telling me if someone's watching this and they say, well, I'm a diabetic or I have this issue or that issue, I wouldn't be suitable. You're saying not necessarily the case?
Yes, absolutely. They can join the registry. That they can do it when they renew their driver's license. They can also do it at the website at donatelifeky.org. And it's just a simple information, and they are on the registry. So anyone at any age can join the registry to save lives.
So if you want to find out more, donatelifeky.org. Now, Stacy, your story is amazing, and I'm sure you're probably still, this happened in 2011, you're probably still reeling from, you know, being seemingly healthy. All of a sudden, within a 2-week period, you find out you have 2 weeks to live. If you don't get a liver, you get a liver, then you have to go through this whole new process as this person now who's had a liver transplant.
Yes, definitely. It was a whirlwind, and I think that was part of the recovery for me. Most patients that are waiting for organs are very sick, and so they're living with an ongoing illness, and my heart goes out to those because I think that's really very difficult. Mine was more of an emotional response because I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't get my head around the fact that this was going to happen to me, especially when my doctors told me. And I have this wonderful doctor at Vanderbilt, and he got down with me and he held my hand and to get me to understand. And he said, "Now, Stacy, you need to understand. You're not going to leave this hospital without a new liver." And then I was okay. But it does take a lot to get your mind around that, the emotions around that, especially during the recovery. But again, I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those wonderful doctors and nurses and that wonderful person who decided to sign that card or to go online and donate, and that family who said, yes, let's go ahead and do this. And
those wishes.
we don't know how many lives they saved with that person. So I'm one of the lucky ones.
You're
so
here to tell.
I'm here to
You're
tell
here
it.
to tell. So one human being can donate how many organs?
7 to 8 organs and a number of tissues. So ultimately, one person can save and enhance the lives of more than 50 people.
It's a very personal choice, a very personal decision, and a very poignant story, and we want to thank you for sharing that. If you would, please, Amber, tell us where someone can find out more information.
They can always go to donatelifeky.org, and that is the registry, or they can always go to KODA's website as well and get more information there.
KODA, Kentucky Organ Donor Affiliates. We've been talking with Amber McGuire representing KODA, and Stacy Hughes, who, thank you so much for sharing your story, liver recipient, and going strong.
And going strong.
All right,
Yes.
that's the way we're going to keep it. Thanks again for being here. When we come back, Kentucky Outlook, we're going to bring up the subject of those end-of-life issues, those conversations that are so difficult to talk about. We have representatives of Hosparus joining us, so stay with us. Kentucky Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. You know, we teased you earlier in the show how in the future, in the coming month, we're going to have a show about word aversion, those words you just don't like to talk about. Well, there are some conversations you just don't like to talk about either, those end-of-life issues. Well, we're going to talk about it as we welcome to the program Melinda Hill, who joins us. She represents Hosparus. In addition, Sue Riggle joins us, and she is the clinical manager with Hosparus. Now, Hosparus, in its publicity, if you will, talks about keeping control in situations that often seem out of control. When you're dealing with a loved one or you yourself are at that place where you don't have much longer on this earth and you've got to make a decision how you want those final days to go. That's often when people turn to Hosparus, which is a hospice-like entity. So help us understand that.
And that's so hard to convey to people, Barbara, that we are there to help. People don't like to realize that they're at the end of life. But the end of life, we want it to be a good part of life. and this is so appropriate to be here because, as you know, my mom was a double lung recipient, and what I would have given to have a service like Hosparus, not just for my mom, but for me. I'll be selfish about that. To have a group of professionals telling me what's going to be happening with my mom in the final days. And that would have helped me so much. So I'm so thankful to be a part of an organization like this that can help people in this sad and difficult time, but to make it as easy and comfortable as possible.
That's so true, because now I've dealt with hospice with loved ones, and they are, and as clinical manager, you know this, boy, you're right on. When they tell you your loved one has X amount of hours, take this time, spend it with them, they are usually right on, my experience has been. So someone comes into Hosparus or hospice and says, you know, we want to use these services. It's a nonprofit organization?
It is nonprofit, and so anyone, we take people who have no payer source, or they could have Medicare, Medicaid, so payer sources vary, but we don't discriminate against anyone. If they come in asking for information, we'll share with them the services we provide, explain who's eligible, and really it usually takes an assessment of that patient to know if they're eligible or not. Sometimes families are just really tired because they've been taking care of a loved one for a long time, but they may not quite be eligible for hospice services. So,
is there a time frame, like the person has to have X amount of time?
well, it
projected?
really is,
And, you know.
there is, by Medicare guidelines, there's a 6-month life expectancy, and that really scares people. But I'll tell you, the sooner we get people, the better we can help them, because just like Melinda was saying, she wished she had that service when her mother was sick. And the reason is we work as a team. So there is a medical director, there's a nurse, a CNA, who's a certified nursing assistant, there's the chaplain, the social worker, and typically there's a volunteer involved. And the entire team looks at this family and the patient. It's not really just about the patient, it's also about the family. So as we look at that whole patient, that whole family, then we start to help them have those difficult conversations, and we help them look at the, what are your goals? What are your goals for care? How do you see?
But do most people even know, really? Sometimes you're put in that situation and you're asked these questions, you're like, I don't know. I can't even see straight, let alone make these decisions.
But just tell me what it is you're looking for. What it is you're looking for. And if you come in as the daughter of a patient and you're just telling me, I just need a break, I just need help, then I know where you're coming from. You're tired, you're wore out. And so my goal for you will be to give you that break you need. So the first thing that's going to pop in my mind is she's going to need CNA services. She's going to need a volunteer to come in and help give her a little break so she can get away. And it really helps you to become a better caregiver for your loved one when you have that break. So it really is it's a different concept. We do symptom management, but to me, that's the least of what we do. That's the easy part, because there's lots of protocols and things for that. That's just the easy part. It's the psychosocial, the emotional aspect of what we do. That's the tougher part of what we do, and it takes the whole team to do that.
To working together. Now, Hosparus itself it doesn't have a physical location, so these people don't go there and spend out their last days. It's more an coming to you kind of service.
Right.
We take care of the patient and their families wherever they call home, be it a nursing home, an assisted living, an apartment, a home, or even a hospital. We can go to that patient to take care of them.
Okay, so that's something different as well. And
Right.
so then you're there. You talked about this requirement by Medicare, that it's a 6-month life expectancy. Maybe somebody doesn't have Medicare. Then how do they fit into this?
It's still the same rule. We still use the same rules. So what we're looking for is someone who is declining. They have a decline. However, we have patients who have been with us for a couple of years. What we have to do is show decline. So our team meets every 2 weeks to discuss every patient and their family. And as we discuss, one of the things we're looking for is, are they declining? What's happening with this patient and family? and how we best going to help them meet their goals and their needs, what they want. So we're focused on the patient and the family, and it doesn't have to be just the 6 months, it can be longer.
Well, but most important is the conversation.
Oh,
is getting people
absolutely.
to have the conversation. In our earlier segment of Kentucky Outlook, you met a woman who found out she had 2 weeks to live, a young woman, and if she didn't get a liver transplant, she got that liver transplant, given a new lease on life. In these cases, you're meeting people at the end. You know, they don't have a new lease on life, they're at the end. And so the conversations, it's got to be, we're just about out of time, but very uplifting.
And what was explained to me, I called one of my friends who was a physician, and she said, Melinda, always remember, it's not quantity of life, but quality of life. And so I think that's what we help provide. We want to give these patients quality of life, however many days they have left on this earth. Let's give them the best quality of life possible. A story that was shared with me, one of our patients, one of his requests was he wanted to see his train set. He did model trains down in his basement. So our team got the patient down to his basement again so he could view his model train set one more time. So
Just
it's all
simple things
yes.
like that. You've probably got a gazillion stories that you could
Absolutely.
share. But leave us with some words of wisdom, Sue.
I just think the sooner we have these conversations, the more we have these conversations in our families, at home, we just need to open up that conversation, tell people what you want. Because 9 out of 10 people want to be where they're surrounded by their loved ones, but 60% of the people die in the hospital. There's a disconnect.
There's a
So
disconnect.
have those conversations.
Well, we hope that we've prompted you to think about it at least. Thank you for sharing that information. We've been talking with Sue Riggle and Melinda Hill representing Hosparus, and earlier we met with representatives of KODA, Kentucky's organ donor affiliates. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. Don't forget to visit us on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, I'm Barbara Deeb.